Hi, welcome to the Neshamas podcast. We at Neshamas are on a mission to promote mental and emotional health within our community. Among the many ways we do this is by empowerment through education. This podcast is where we get to listen to personal experiences of those who have been affected by mental illness, the pain, the struggle to get better, and today, by the grace of God, have emerged with a message of hope and healing. My name is Moshe Chanan. I am a grateful addict in recovery, and I am a certified life and addiction recovery coach. I'm here to encourage vulnerability and allow for hope to emerge from the internal journeys we share. Please join me, hear the stories of these heroes, and know that you are not alone. Hi, welcome back to the Neshamas podcast. Today we are honored to have Rachel Cohen. She's a wife and a mother of 2 children. She grew up in Long Island, and that's where she currently lives. She is a special ed teacher. She's here to share her story of how she is recovering from the trauma of childhood sexual abuse and medical trauma, which led her to self-medicating and soothing with anorexia, drugs, specifically opioids. She will share with us how she continues to heal and in the process inspires others with her blog writing. And you've also done some other podcasts, right?
Yeah.
You have done some other podcasts. And she's here to help others find their way to recovery. So welcome, Rachel.
Thank you. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to be here.
You're very welcome. Thank you for being here. Thank you for being an advocate for others. And thank you for all the work you've done on yourself to be there. Can you introduce yourself to us? Just give us some background. What was life like when you were younger, before, I guess, trauma
Before the
entered?
Sure. I grew up on Long Island. At the time, right before my trauma, I had one brother. Later on, my parents had 2 other children. We were very happy, very content. It's a good life. We lived in the 5 towns. I was relatively close with my brother, and my parents were really there for us. I don't have a lot of memories of the trauma. I was 6 years old when it happened, and I actually didn't remember the trauma for many years until I was about 19 years old. So now I have flashbacks and I have some memories of it, and I could share those, but some of it's a little bit hazy. I was 6, first grade, and this is actually the first time I've shared this, but it was a custodian in my school. He used to bring me flowers and chocolate, and at the time, nobody really blinked about it. Nobody was concerned. He would just bring me little presents, which when I look back on now is really creepy. At the time, everybody thought it was sweet, and so I got to know him. I got to trust him. I didn't realize that at the time he was grooming me, he was really getting me to trust him, to really believe that he was a good guy. So that way, when it became time to cross that boundary of being appropriate, I didn't think twice about it. He began to molest me when I was like midway through my first grade year. Throughout the whole time, he continued bringing me presents, just being very kind. And I guess as most kids that age, and most kids as a whole, they like when people give them attention. They like when people are kind to them and they give them things. And so I enjoyed it I enjoyed it on a 6-year-old level, surface level. He continued to abuse me for about a year. I wish I could tell you when it stopped, why it stopped. I don't really know. I don't have clear memories of how it stopped. I can tell you that nobody ever knew about it. I never told a soul. My parents didn't know, doctors, no one.
Did you subconsciously know that it was something to keep a secret?
He used to say to me, he would say things like, "I'm good to you, right? I'm so kind to you. You don't need to tell anybody about what we're doing here." And I think, it wasn't even subconsciously. It was pretty straight out. He would say to me, "You don't need to tell anybody." And I just thought, okay. We'd gotten to the point where he was just an adult that I could trust. So there's no reason why I would have thought any other way.
What are your memories after that? In any way, how that impacted you?
So It's interesting how the subconscious works, I would say, in our brain works, where we could tuck something so deeply in the back of our brains or, in a tight little corner, but it doesn't mean that our symptoms after the fact are not going to happen. It doesn't mean that we're going to just be fine and go on about our day, about our life.
That was your experience.
Yeah, my brain knew what was going on, and I was a very depressed kid. I have memories of sitting in my closet in my room and writing, "I feel blue" on blue paper. That's just a big memory that I have.
Any significance, or any meaning to that you can make out right now?
Just that I was really, I felt not okay, but I didn't know why I felt that way. And I think it makes it worse when we don't have a reason. Like when we feel like when we're not feeling good, but we don't really know why, or we're feeling invalidated about the way we're feeling.
I don't have the right to feel this way.
Yeah. So I think I invalidated myself, even that young. Why are you feeling this way? Nothing happened. Why are you 6, 7, 8, and all your friends are having fun and you're writing sad notes and you're crying at the lunch table and sitting in the corner and crying? I cried all the time. I don't know. I don't have an answer to why nobody noticed or worried. It's definitely something that I've had to work through as I got older. But yeah, as 6, 7, 8, 9, I was sad, I was depressed. I was very advanced in my reading, and I used to read a lot of Holocaust books and books on death. And I was made fun of constantly by my family. "Oh, Rachel, she's so sad. She's so pathetic. She's obsessed with death."
It's interesting. I've heard that before already a few times. The go-to is Holocaust books and stories as one of the coping mechanisms.
Really?
Yeah. For trauma specifically.
It's a really good, I appreciate you telling me that, because all the little things, like when we find out that somebody else has had the same experience, it feels good. It's very validating.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, I wonder if that's something you can reach out to the people who who have similar stories to you and ask them if that's something. Yeah, and maybe it's that thing. I'm not the only one.
Yeah, or people have it worse than I do, or something like that.
So if that happened, the depression and the sadness and the crying, how long did that last?
Years. Along with that came body aches. I complained about everything. I used to tell my mom that my eyelids hurt, my eyelash hurt. And again, everybody made fun of me. I was always sick. I was always not feeling well. I have a memory in kindergarten of my teachers, and I was small, I guess, at the time. I have an image of two adults looming over me, rolling their eyes at each other when I asked for an ice pack or something, because I was never feeling well. And I know that's very typical also, that the somatic feelings and that the trauma comes out in our body.
I'm just thinking about the impact that one has on the other. So the layers, the sadness, and then being seen as someone who's sad.
That's right.
And then being called, I guess call it bullying, but you can call it whatever it is, being name called or being.
It's a very good point.
Are you open to sharing a little bit of the inner dialogue that happened? I know you mentioned something about what's wrong with you.
Yeah, that was definitely a big question that I asked myself a lot. It wasn't why am I so sad? It was, what's wrong with you? How could you be this way? It was and to this day, and I'm working really hard on it, but I was so hard on myself. Even back then, why aren't you like everybody else? And this niggling feeling that something happened or something was wrong, but I didn't know what.
Mm-hmm.
Which I feel like, to anybody who hasn't experienced it, it sounds weird. How could you just forget that something happened? But I didn't remember any of it.
When did it come back to you?
When I was 19, I had just gotten married, and I had a flashback of a man, and it went away really fast. But it kept coming back, and eventually the memories got stronger and more colorful and more vivid, and he really took the brunt of it, because he was the male figure in my life at that time who I trusted 1,000,000,000,000,000%. And so I think subconsciously I knew that I could
You trusted him a
Yeah.
1,000,000%. Yeah.
Yeah. So I saw him as like my abuser, my husband, even though literally he is the most amazing person in the world and he would never hurt a soul. But I started seeing him as this man who I used to call Ball Man, because for some reason I had this image of the cartoon ball figure. That was him. When I remembered what was happening and all the memories, it was like a cartoon ball that was doing everything to me.
Until that time, from when you were 14, 15, 16, you said you were very depressed and very sad. Was there anything in between 16 and 19 that did it just continue the same way, or did it change?
So if we were to rewind just a little bit, 13 through 17 was all anorexia. Those years are also a little blurry, but that was my main coping skill at the time. And I met my husband when I was 15. So through those years, and those years in between, like when I had the flashbacks, I was actually doing pretty well because I had somebody who I trusted, who I loved, who took me seriously and never, ever made fun of me. That was, for me, one of the biggest things. Like he just, if I said that I felt a certain way, I felt that way to him. There was no question about it. So I did well. I don't know where I would be without him. It's actually the night before I met him. We met at a Purim Suda. The night before, I turned to Hashem and I said, Hashem, please just send me my basher early. I need my basher now to help me get through this. I met him the next day and I told my mom, this is the boy who I'm going to marry.
That's when you were 15?
15. He didn't have the same feelings just yet.
Right, okay. If you can excuse my ignorance, how did anorexia soothe you? Like, how did that?
It's pretty simple. Anorexia, okay, there were two ways actually. The first thing is that being obsessed with thoughts of food or obsessions with the hunger that you're feeling, like this dire hunger that you feel when you're starving yourself, it takes away every other emotion. There's nothing that you can focus on besides how hungry you are, how much you want food.
So that turns off all the other noise.
It's like a drug. I'm going to sound ignorant here, but just by saying there are studies, and I don't know where, who, whatever, but that show that is actually a high. First, when you get over the initial hump of starving yourself, then the more you starve and for longer periods of time, it becomes like a high.
Did people notice that?
They did, but...
And did it start making its way into being a concern for you, like something that you wanted help with?
I had concern from friends and from teachers who called home and said, listen, something's just not right. But I managed to, I would say, talk my way out of it, if that makes any sense.
Right. Also, you didn't have a big T, quote, to point to say what's wrong with you.
And that's huge. That was that was the thing again, when I would say to myself, what is wrong with you that you're starving yourself? What is it exactly that's making you so obsessed with not eating? Figure it out. And
Did you see somebody else doing it, or it's just something you discovered alone?
This is something I had trouble admitting for a long time, but a friend of mine's mother had passed away in 8th grade, and she got a lot of attention because she stopped eating. And I thought, what a great way to get attention. I'll stop eating too. That was it. And it took me a while to accept this about myself, because I was always like, what's wrong with me that I needed so much attention? Why do I need so much attention? Now I know that I was literally crying out for attention. Somebody pay attention to me. Somebody notice that I'm struggling here, that I'm hurting. Now it makes sense, but it didn't back then.
In what ways was your husband helpful?
It's hard to list them all, but we'll go with a few. The first thing was that he just accepted the things that I said. I think the biggest one was the fact that he believed me in whatever I said, and he validated me in whatever I needed validating in.
Like allowing you to feel.
Yeah.
You're allowed to feel that.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because earlier you were saying how you didn't allow yourself to feel.
That's right. And to this day, again, I'm working very hard, but it's something that you don't shake so easily. And I'm very hard on myself. I have trouble allowing myself to just feel. And he'll say to me things like, it's okay to feel what you're feeling. Just because this person has it worse or this person has it different doesn't mean that your feelings aren't difficult or bad or in need of love. And I tell this to parents when they ask me what they could do if, God forbid, their child comes to them and says, I was abused or something like this happens. And I said, the first thing you need to do is believe them, no matter what. Validate their feelings and believe in them. Because that's everything. So that's definitely the mean way that he was able to.
You were saying that anorexia was your coping mechanism from 13 to 17. How did it end?
With my husband. Because there was somebody who accepted me for who I was and who loved me no matter what. Not that my parents didn't. I had unconditional love from them, but we sometimes say, oh, but you're my parent. It doesn't count from you. And also it was hard to get their attention. But with my husband, it was, even at that age, he was wise beyond his years. He's a psychologist now, so it makes sense. He is very intuitive and wise, and he never pushed me, and he would never put a slice of pizza in front of me and be like, eat, or try to convince me to eat. It wasn't about that. He understood that it went deeper and that I just needed support.
And once you get the support, that's when you stop needing to do that.
Yeah. And
until that point, no therapy.
I had seen a therapist in high school. She knew what was going on, and she was great, and she was very helpful. But, talk therapy only goes so far. And I needed somebody in my life like my husband. There's another part, which is that the other reason why I decided on anorexia, I just stopped eating.
Consciously.
Yeah, was that I knew that my body wouldn't change if I continued to not eat. And I would stay like a little girl. And for me, and for many people I know who have suffered from childhood sexual abuse, that's a very big deal.
You want to remain a child.
Yeah. And then when I met my husband, suddenly he not only appreciated the way I looked, but he made me want to be an adult because I wanted to have a real adult relationship with him. So that was something else.
Did that cause any stress? Meaning needing to carry both? Wanting to be an adult and wanting to remain a child?
Great question. Yeah, definitely. It's confusing. It causes a lot of guilt. And yeah, it's really confusing because on one hand, you want to be celebrating these pounds that you're gaining and the way your body's changing. And at the same time, you're absolutely terrified.
Mm-hmm.
And
what do you think helped you carry through that?
I think I want to say support from my friends, and I don't want to put everything on my husband, but from him also. And I don't know that I've fully gotten through that. I think it's still something that I'm working on.
Mm-hmm. I'm just going to be open. There's just the one word that's coming to me as I'm speaking with you, and it's the word gentleness. You're being gentle with it, or allowing both to be. It's okay to want to be this, and it's okay to be just like you were when you were younger, how your husband allowed you to feel what you were feeling. You can continue to do that.
It's true.
Can you bring us into what happened after your marriage? What does it mean? What does it even mean, medical trauma? From
really the beginning of our marriage, maybe even a little bit before, I started having certain symptoms. I don't have to go into all the details, but basically for about 10 years, the doctors couldn't figure out what was wrong with me. I was having a lot of pain. It got to the point where I was literally in pain 24/7, physical pain.
Wow.
And they went through everything. They tried every test. One doctor sent me to the next doctor, Nobody could figure out what was going on. A lot of doctors told me that it was all in my head. They told me that it was because I was molested. that it was somatic that I was, which I completely believe in the mind-body connection, 100%. But I knew something was really wrong. Yeah, like a psychosomatic feeling, whatever experience. But I knew something else was wrong. And to be told many times that nothing's wrong, to bring that up in validation once again, to just be telling yourself, like, why are you feeling this way? Why are you in pain? Nothing's wrong with you. Because that's basically what the doctors told me, that nothing was wrong. I went through countless surgeries. After I was diagnosed, it was not the end. I was diagnosed with something called endometriosis, which is basically when tissue that's similar to the lining of the uterus grows on the wrong parts of the body. And it's very hard to diagnose because the only true way of diagnosing it is laparoscopically, is by opening somebody up. And it has to be done by specialists. So I had many surgeries by doctors who thought they were able to remove all the endometriosis, or we call it endo for short. And they told me that I shouldn't be having pain anymore, but I still was. At some point, I even had one of the biggest doctors, supposedly one of the biggest doctors in endometriosis care, telling me that I was just going to be in pain for the rest of my life. That night, I told my husband that I wanted to kill myself. I didn't want to live anymore if I was going to be in pain forever. The pain is like nothing I had ever experienced prior to that, and I've never experienced anything since then. It is the most excruciating pain. And I couldn't be there for anybody who I loved. So it took 10 years to get diagnosed, and then 5 years of suffering after diagnosis. For that amount of time, I sat on the couch most of my day, every day, in a fetal position. I watched my children grow up in front of me. I watched my husband and them have fun times together, enjoy themselves, and I couldn't be a part of it. And that was when the opiates came in to the picture. When the doctors couldn't figure out what was wrong with me, they just started throwing pain medication my way. Started out small. I wrote this essay about my opiate abuse, and I started out talking about the first time I ever experienced morphine when I was in the hospital. And I talk about how it was like a seismic event, that feeling of being in agony, and then suddenly you're not. It's like, it feels like a bracha. It is a bracha from Hashem when you're in so much pain to not be in pain anymore. And that's why pain medication is still very important. Opiates are still very important in certain settings. You'll never hear me say that they're terrible for everybody. But they were like my God almost, if I could say, which sounds awful, but they were taking away my pain. The one thing that kept me from being part of the world, they made better. And it started out physical. It started out as just they took away my physical pain. And then I began to realize that when I was taking the opiates, whose dosage got progressively larger and larger, prescription all from my doctor, when I was taking the medication, I didn't feel anything. I didn't feel pain. I also didn't feel sadness. I didn't feel unworthy. I didn't feel confusion. I didn't feel anything that I had been feeling for all those years since I was 6 years old. And it's obvious. I feel like, how could I not have gotten addicted after that? When you're suffering for so many years emotionally and physically, and suddenly something comes and takes away that pain.
I think it's so important to hear that side of the coin of addiction. Addiction is not addiction. Look on the other side of it. What's behind it is somebody who's in pain and is just looking to not feel the pain. So we're not addicted to meds. We are obsessed with not feeling in pain.
That's right. 100%.
And the more the pain, the more obsessed we are.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That's exactly what it is. I also wrote in that essay that you don't need to be like in the worst possible crowd in order to become a drug addict. All you need is pain and a desire to make the pain go away.
Mm-hmm. Where can people find that essay?
It's on my blog, which I want to give the address to, but it's one of those Wix free sites. So it's like really ridiculously long. It's something like It's called Midnight Musings. And if you look up Midnight Musings Wix site, I believe you'll find it.
Okay. Also with your name, I imagine that'll make it even easier.
Exactly. There's also an amazing online magazine called The Layers Project.
Who told me? Oh, yeah. I just saw the interview.
Rachel Herkman, do you know? Is that why?
No, I saw she was on our podcast. We just didn't release the episode yet. I'm not sure if I should say it, but yeah, somebody who's been actually got interviewed.
So yeah, that was the original time that I wrote it, that essay. That was the first time that I ever said in public that I had been addicted to opiates.
Where did that take you? If the opiates brings you back to life, how did it start, like, taking you away?
I think that, do you mind if I think for a second on that one?
The reason why I'm asking is because there comes a certain point where you're inspired to stop.
Okay. So basically, I continued taking opiates despite the ramifications, despite the fact that I knew I was taking more than I was supposed to, despite the fact that...
you were taking more than what was prescribed?
Oh, yeah.
So it was prescribed, but
I jumped. Okay, yeah. So initially it was prescribed, and it was as per doctor's orders, but it gets to the point where the body gets habituated to it, and the brain wants more in order to give you that same feeling of happiness and also non-pain. And so I took more, and I continued to take more. And
did you ever consider going to the doctor and asking them for more?
I was on probably the strongest dosage that any doctor would ever get. Doctors used to tell me that I was not enough to kill a horse. So I didn't need to go back to a doctor to get more. I was given basically the most possible. And I don't think physically my pain was being taken care of after a while. But at that point, I had realized all the emotional benefits, and I didn't want those to go away. So I continued to take the opiates until I finally found a surgeon in Atlanta who's an endometriosis specialist. And he removed the endo, finally, thank God. And this was in 2014. And right after that, he told me in 6 weeks you'll be feeling better. It was like 6 weeks on the dot. I started to feel better. And I realized that I didn't need them anymore, the opiates. By then, they had wreaked havoc on everything in my life. I had no relationship with my husband. I had no relationship with my kids.
And how does that manifest itself? What was the buildup and what did it lead to?
So if you want to feel the good, you have to feel the bad too. And yes, the opiates, they took away my feelings of my negative feelings and my pain. But at the same time, they took away basically all my feelings. And I was a shell. I didn't really have any feelings. And I was so obsessed with them and the way they made me feel that I shut out everything else in my life. I also was going up and down because basically I would take a ton, run out of my medication, go through withdrawal, be absolutely miserable.
Probably sweats and sick.
Everything. And I thought I was hiding it from my husband. I thought like nobody knew. And then I would get the new prescription when it was time again, up again.
How long was the periods of high and lows?
It was probably about, at my worst, it could have been 10 days with the meds. That was supposed to last for 30 days and then 20 days off.
Wow.
That was probably the worst. And between the obsession with these meds and the constant highs and lows, I was either fast asleep or yelling at my family. They gave me the moods that I was in. It was horrible. The mood swings, and I had no connection to anybody. I was a shell, and I was obsessed with just give me the opiates. That's all I cared about.
And you were aware? Did you spend time ruminating in the fact that you were lying and hiding? Did that bother you?
It did. And when it bothered me, I would just take another pill. And then I wouldn't have to think about it anymore. Yeah. Guilt. feelings of guilt can consume you, and I couldn't handle it.
You couldn't handle the guilt, and so you just take more.
Yeah.
So how'd you stop?
I stopped feeling physical pain at the same time that my husband and I went away for a weekend, and Min Hashem, I decided to open up to him, and I told him everything that was going on. And he was there for me. Like, he did not, yes, he did not react in the way I expected him to. He had known the whole time. It wasn't as if he didn't know. But he said, we're gonna get you help. We're gonna do this together. And his, that Shabbos, we joke about it. It was this random place in Freeport that we got stuck in for Shabbos. It had a hole in the wall. It was freezing. There were springs coming out of the mattresses. It was like the worst, and it was the best Shabbos of our lives. So we used to have, I don't know where it went, we had a magnet on our refrigerator from Freeport, and because it reminds us of how we were able to bring our lives back together, how we were able to come back to each other.
What were the steps you took to begin your journey for recovery?
I called a program called Project Outreach. It's in West Hempstead. And
how'd you hear about it?
My therapist at the time. So that was the first thing.
Oh, so you were continuously seeing a therapist this whole time.
So my husband, so I can call him Ellie. I don't know why I keep calling my husband Ellie. And I went to my therapist. That was the first thing we did. And we said, listen, like, she's she's addicted. We need help. I'm addicted. I need help. And she said, I know. She said, of course I knew. But she said, I thought everybody who is in chronic pain abuses their opiates, which I thought was an interesting thing to say. I don't know if that's true or not. So together we told her. She recommended two places. One was out of state, and one was in state, and it was an outpatient program. By then, I was completely off all the opiates. I had just basically gotten off all of them and gone through withdrawal and finished that.
How did you do the withdrawal? Did you do it in a detox, or you did it again on your own?
I did it in my house.
What would you recommend to somebody else?
Detox. In a second.
I'm only laughing because I've learned that's obvious.
Yeah. I mean, why don't suffer?
Right. Yeah, I did it in a psych ward.
That's even worse, though, I feel like.
I hear you, but if I would have had all those withdrawals, it's also I was detoxing from alcohol, which is dangerous to do.
Yeah.
So once you were detoxed, you went to this program.
I went, and we decided to give it a chance. And if I felt like it wasn't enough of what I needed, then I would go ahead and go to this place in Arizona. But it turned out to be enough. I was there for 8 months.
Wow.
Yeah.
How were you willing to make that type of commitment?
Because I wanted to be the woman that my husband deserved. After that, first of all, I was out of pain. Let's start with that. So I was thinking more clearly from the surgery. That's the first step. The second step was that Ellie and I had this experience where I really opened up to him, and we connected like we hadn't connected in a very long time. Mm. So I suddenly had another, I stopped thinking about myself for 5 seconds, which I hadn't been.
You
it was
stepped
all about
out of
me.
the survival mode. You didn't have to think about yourself.
Exactly. So then I could start thinking about, what about Ellie? What about my kids? And from there, I went to this program, and I felt like every single thing that I did in this program was for my family and for myself, obviously. But they were what kept me going. And I was probably the only one who actually chose to be there. There's a lot of mandated people. And I watched and I spoke to people who had lost their families and had lost really everything in their lives because of their addiction. And I looked back and I thought, I am so fortunate, because I could have lost Ellie in a second, and I could have lost my kids and a whole lot of other things. I could have gotten into a car accident while driving, while on the opiates. There were so many
amounts you were taking.
Yes.
And also every time you detox and you take that amount again, it's a huge chance of overdose.
That's right. It's literally from Hashem that nothing happened. I never overdosed. My husband told me like a year later that he always had Narcan in the house, which I didn't even know about, but he always kept it there just in case. So I heard these people's stories and I recognized the fact that I was luckier than I could have ever thought. And that encouraged me even more.
What do you feel like? Yeah, what did you learn there? What happened throughout the 8 months?
I think the biggest thing that I learned was to be comfortable with being uncomfortable.
Mm-hmm.
Something that I still work on today, but it was like I felt a twinge of any kind of discomfort, emotional, physical, any type, and I would just take a pill. And I needed to learn that I couldn't do that anymore. So I needed to gather other coping mechanisms.
What were other coping mechanisms that you learned?
Meditation, writing. I learned to use my writing skills to really explore my feelings.
Mm-hmm.
I started writing more poetry. I learned to meditate. I learned to really go inside myself and not only understand myself, but allow myself to have feelings and to the non-judgment part of meditation was something that really struck me. This idea that we can hear our feelings, listen to our feelings, and not be judgmental of it. For me, that was like monumental because I'm like the best judge of the worst judge of myself. So meditation, being in the moment, learning to just be. Writing. I had always been a good writer, but I started to write more, write poetry, really process a lot of things through my writing, specifically my sexual abuse that I had never processed. So the writing was very helpful. I learned to utilize my singing abilities to help me stay calm, help me relax when I was anxious. These are just a few of the coping skills that I use. And we learned so many.
What do you think made you need to be in the program for 8 months as opposed to people who go to a 30-day program or a 60-day program?
A 30-day program is great. 60 days is great. Nobody heals from a lifetime of trauma in 30 days, 60 days. It doesn't work that way. It's a beginning, and it's a great beginning. But in my opinion, you can't heal that quickly. I couldn't heal that quickly.
Mm-hmm. So was it like it was a slow process, or was every day packed in of those 8 months? Or was it like a gentle path?
The way it works is that 3 days a week I had group therapy. 2 days a week I had a private therapist, and I also had a psychiatrist who I saw. So the group therapy days were more intensive.
Yeah, same for me.
Yeah.
Those were great. I love those.
I love group therapy. I'm a big proponent of it. And then just seeing the therapist twice a week was incredible. I had an incredible therapist who I connected with very well. And we worked slowly through my trauma. I had never done that because I went from trauma to trauma. I went from sexual abuse to anorexia to endometriosis. I had never really dealt with what had happened when I was younger. So that was a big deal. I went up and down during those 8 months. There were times where I fell down. Like I would find like an opiate in a random spot that I hadn't thrown away, and I would take it.
You're saying after the 8 months?
During the 8 months.
Oh, so it was an outpatient?
It was outpatient.
Okay.
So yeah, I could never do
it. Yeah. I was thinking like 8 months in inpatient.
That's a really long time. It went up and down. It was interesting, actually. The reason why I stopped going there was because I had stopped eating again.
I was just going to ask that. Did that come up?
Yeah. So it's very typical, apparently, that when you're working through one trauma or you stop one kind of bad coping skill, you end up taking on an old one. So I had stopped eating again. And there was one time where I passed out during a session. And after that, they told me I couldn't come back until I went to an eating disorder program. So from there, I went to an eating disorder program. And then...
What's the difference?
It was a lot more... These were younger girls, the eating disorder program. And it was homier. It was like couches. And we ate together. We ate meals together. So it was like almost like a home, this eating disorder program, as opposed to Project Outreach, which was more like people, they came, they did their thing and left. It was more clinical, I would say. But it was great. I wouldn't say anything bad about it. It was just a little more clinical. In terms of the eating disorder program, it was tough for me because I had a hard time with the fact that when I was sick, I had gained a lot of weight. And at the time, I hadn't found health at every size and intuitive eating and all that and appreciating my body for what it is. And the fact that I was heavy and still going to an eating disorder program made me feel like I had failed as an
Like failed both
anorexic.
worlds.
Yeah. And it was very hard for me to deal with. But I made it through.
What do you think helped you through that?
I was tired. I was tired of being unhappy and sick. And I wanted to get on with my life, like really start again.
What was the fundamentals of your recovery from anorexia? If working through the 8 months you worked in your trauma and that helped you with the addiction recovery, what recovery was available to you in the anorexia that you didn't have before?
A lot of body acceptance.
Sounds like the other one's emotional acceptance. And this one's
Yes,
physical.
exactly. I wouldn't consider myself healed in terms of my eating disorder. I still have a very disordered eating to the point where it could be considered an eating disorder. And that's something that I'm still obviously working on a lot. But for me, the biggest thing was, body acceptance, health at every size. I don't know if you've heard of it, but
I have heard of intuitive eating.
yeah. You have, is it? Or you?
Intuitive eating?
Yeah. Yeah. So intuitive eating and just learning.
And it is what it sounds like. It's intuitive eating.
Basically, with a couple more principles added onto it. But it's an anti-diet. And just learning that no matter what I look like, I am deserving of love and deserving of respect and from myself. I'm talking obviously from other people, but I'm talking about myself. That I still need to love and respect myself no matter what. And not just despite what I look like, but part of like what I look like is a part. It's not, oh, I look a certain way, so I don't deserve love, but I'm going to give it to myself anyway kind of thing. It's I love myself for who I am, what I look like, what I feel like, everything. So that's, something that I definitely work hard on.
What does recovery on a day-to-day basis look like for you today?
Can I rewind just a little?
Absolutely.
Okay. I had a relapse a while back, not that long ago, about a year. I was in a car accident and I needed to have surgery on my neck. And I started taking opiates again. It was a very different experience though, because it wasn't as bad in terms of the emotional part of it. But I ended up going to an amazing trauma program in Florida. It's called The Refuge.
Yes. Okay. Beautiful. I've heard that a few times now.
Amazing. And so it was there that I learned to feel. And I think that's and I'll explain what that means, but that's my day-to-day recovery. That's what it looks like. It's teaching myself to feel. Because again, between dissociating that, which is, we didn't really talk about it, but I dissociated a lot when I was younger. And then the anorexia and then the opiates. It was a lot of not feeling. And these days, it's about letting myself sit with my emotions, no matter what they are. Because still these days, I'm scared. I feel an uncomfortable feeling, emotion. I want to reach for something. I do. And I think I always will. But these days, it's about having compassion for myself and saying, I know you feel this way. It will pass. It feels really uncomfortable right now to be feeling X emotion, whatever it is. Just feel it. Feel how your heart feels. Feel how your body feels it is. Sit with it. It sucks. And then it's going to pass. And for me, that's my daily work. And it includes a lot of journaling, a lot of writing, poetry, blogs, helping other people, talking to other women who have endo, advocating for them, talking to women and men who have dealt with substance abuse. And of course, being there for my family.
I'm just going to ask this question not because I'm curious about it, but just because it's a question that someone can ask as they're beginning their journey of recovery. And how do you feel about all the work that you're doing? Is it a burden? Is it like, do you feel like your life has been taken over by all these things that you have to do and you don't get to live?
So in the beginning, when I was first in Project Outreach, they described addiction or being an addict to walking up and down an elevator, that you're always going to be trying, you're always going to be working hard and trying to get up that elevator. And if you're not careful, you're always going to fall back down. And never loved that idea. It scared me. But that's how I viewed recovery in the beginning. Just like basically clawing myself out of the hole, just trying, fighting
Just
to get
stay still
out.
for 1 minute, you're going to fall down.
Yeah. And at that time, I felt like everything that I had to do was a burden. It was just so much. I don't want to do this. I just want to take the opiate and go enjoy myself. Like, I don't want to try so hard. But these days, it's become more second nature to me. It's actually more it's like self-care for me to process my emotions and to sit with my emotions.
I'm wondering if there's a joy in that or it's a burden. Like,
So some days it feels like a burden, I'm not gonna lie, but most of the time there's an incredible joy at feeling. Like the fact that I can feel again, it's incredible. It's a cliche about somebody who can't see and then suddenly putting on glasses or whatever. Like everything's bright that way. And to be so in tune with your body and your emotions, it makes everything like colorful and vivid and in a way that life wasn't for so long. Like when I imagine my life before the hard work that I did, it was colorless and it was sad.
the refuge was inpatient.
Refuge was impatient.
And how long was that?
I was there for 5 weeks. If I could have been there longer, I would have in a second. I couldn't leave my family for that long. But there I also worked through more trauma, which was very necessary. I did get off of substances when I was there, but that wasn't the main reason why we decided that I should go. It was good to be able to focus on myself again for a little while.
Did you fight going into inpatient?
I chose it.
You chose it. Wow.
Yeah. It was one of the hardest things I've ever had to do, to leave my family.
What was the hardest part of the 5 weeks? I'm asking because I'm wondering if it's...
The first week is by far the most taxing in terms... Okay. I would say it's not... The first week, you're getting used to things, which is very hard. It's obviously getting off of the substances. You're a wreck. But the deep, difficult emotional work, for me, that was the hardest part. And those were the weeks after that first week. Those were the hardest parts. Really, at the refuge, no words are minced. So, like, you talk about things. If you get into things, you don't dance around them. And really getting deep, using words that I had never used, like rape and certain words that I had never used before. It was so hard, but it was so freeing after I was able to do it.
I'm wondering, I'm experiencing this being like towards the completion of your story. For now, obviously, it's always ongoing.
Yeah.
But I'm wondering if there's anything else you wanted to share before we go. Maybe a message.
Yeah. I think the most important thing that I want to tell anybody who's listening is that you can do it, because I never thought that I could. In a million years, if you would have told me that I would be where I am now. You can do it, and it's going to be hard. Like, it's not going to be easy. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. Like, it's going to be really difficult, but it's so worth it in the end to do that hard work. Your life will be changed forever in such a wonderful way. I think for me, that's the biggest thing. And I also want people to know that anything that they feel is valid. Every feeling they have, every emotion they have, every thought that they have, it's valid. And the work really starts once you're able to accept that. Yeah.
Your feelings are valid. Your addiction is valid.
That's right.
Your
Your
eating
experience.
Everything's valid.
Everything.
And from when it becomes valid and accepted, that's where the healing begins.
That's right. Because then you can say to yourself, okay, I've accepted that. Now I deserve to move on and fix everything.
Right. Otherwise, you're earning the merit of being worthy of healing. Wow, that's incredible.
And I think to a certain degree, we can't fully accept it because we always have those thoughts in the back of our brains and our different parts of us, but that think negative thoughts, but you have to go there. Like really get yourself to that point. Don't let those niggling thoughts in the back of your brain.
Or accept that those thoughts are also allowed.
For sure, but don't let them win because
right.
you tell yourself that you're going to accept it. And that's when you move on.
Beautiful. I thank you so much.
Thank you.
And thank your husband.
It's wonderful.
That's incredible.
I thank him every day.
On behalf of every single individual that ever gains from hearing your story, we thank you and your husband and all those that helped you in your journey.
Thank you so much. Thank you for everything that you do. And of course, can never thank Hashem enough for everything that he's done for me.
Thank you for listening. Please share your feedback by emailing us at podcast@neshamas.org. We hope you'll be back for the next episode of the Neshamas podcast. This is Moshe Chanan wishing you a healthy and a meaningful day.